Welcome to the Career Meets World podcast, Maya. I am so excited to have you on today to share your journey, your wisdom, your life experiences, and talk about what you've been doing, what you've been accomplishing in the tech world. So, first and foremost, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this conversation.
Awesome. So, look, Maya, you and I just had a quick moment to chat, and I'm super excited for our audience to learn what your journey has been like because it certainly has not been linear. I think when we often look at successful people, we want to emulate what they've done, what they've accomplished, and it looks so easy. It looks like they just figured it out and it's just glowing for them and they're getting opportunity after opportunity. But within a few moments of talking with you, I've learned that your life is far from linear and far from easy. And you and I both share a little bit of a background, both having lived in Israel. You've lived there a little bit longer than I have. So let's start there because I want people to learn about you and what you've done and all of your accomplishments. Can you tell us a little bit about what life was like for you in Israel? I know you started working in tech for quite a while. What was that like for you?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for looking at my career and thinking that's, a successful person. I do think that success is something that you define for yourself, and I definitely feel that way, but thank you for that compliment. I actually, had a very strange career path. So I started my career as a travel agent. And it was literally because I needed money to put myself through college. I didn't, have the ability to pay for it unless I worked. So I spent almost 7 years working for a travel agency, moving forward in my career, becoming a manager, doing a bunch of stuff, but not really having passion for what I did. And one day, I was doing my bachelor's and it just hit me: marketing. This is the thing that I'm supposed to do. This is interesting. It's fun. Can I have a career doing that? But at that point, I had zero experience in marketing. And while a degree is great, it doesn't actually give you experience. So I decided to figure out what a career in marketing could look like for me. I just Googled it because I had no one to talk to. I didn't know any marketers. And I landed on this thing called Facebook, which was very new at the time, which tells you exactly how old I am. Um, and it just seemed so interesting and exciting. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to go into social media. And I had to figure out how to do it. So I read everything I could find about social media and how to use it. I built my own profiles. And I even went back to my manager at the travel agency and asked them for permission to actually launch a Facebook page for them. And I was like, I'm going to do it on my spare time. I think it's going to help you. We're going to get more customers. Would you mind if I do that? And they were very open to it. I've been there for almost 7 years, so they really trusted me. And for 6 months, I did social media marketing. I created content. I built a community, and I really gained the confidence I needed to take it to the next level and actually take a job doing social media. And I actually got my first real marketing job through Twitter. Again, I was really into social media. I spent all my time there. And I spent probably 4.5 years doing that, doing social media and PR at a small agency when I realized, you know what? There's more to marketing. Social media is great, but I want to know more. And I think if you look at my career, that's kind of what I did. Every time I saw something that seemed really interesting and really exciting for me within marketing, I just kind of moved to the next level. So from social media, I moved into digital marketing, where I had an opportunity to work on a global brand, super exciting, SodaStream. Got to do a Super Bowl ad with Scarlett Johansson and build an e-commerce website. Seriously, so many different experiences. But I also learned digital marketing wasn't for me. It actually didn't make me happy. So I actually shifted into a role that was more aligned with my strengths, which is storytelling and brand building. And I took on a product marketing role at Microsoft. Did that for a couple of years, had an amazing, amazing team to work with. But I worked mostly with startups. And it kind of got me excited about the thought of building something from the ground up. And I just decided I'm going to do it. I'm going to join a startup. And imagine my family telling them, oh, I'm leaving a very secure job at Microsoft to go work for a company with like 30 people. But I just knew it was going to really help me grow in my career a lot faster. So I took that next step, joined Kolu to lead marketing for them. And the rest is kind of history.
So thank you for sharing that. And what I want to expand on is really this idea that we're making this leap from security to taking a risk, or we categorize it as a risk. And oftentimes people who are immigrants, immigrant descendants, even if you have a stable family and you're from the US, it doesn't matter what demographic you're in, but more often than not, it's challenging for immigrants to share that story with their parents. I know this happened to you in Israel, but regardless, they still wanted stability for you. Can you unpack that conversation? Because ultimately, it's not easy. I had the same experience with my family when I said I'm leaving. Well, at the time it was a stable company, WeWork, but nonetheless, a stable, more corporate job to pursue entrepreneurship, to pursue something small and innovative and creative that has no guarantee for stability. What was that
Yeah.
conversation like?
Um, Interesting for sure. I think you should know in general, I'm actually risk averse. I consider myself someone who doesn't take that many big risks. So even when I make this kind of jump, I make sure that it's somewhat within my comfort zone in terms of risk. So I probably wouldn't have joined a company that had 5 employees and no guarantee for a salary for the next year. But I felt comfortable enough to join a company with 30 people who raised enough money to have like 2 years of a runway where I'm at least going to have a chance of building something and seeing it, if it works for me. In terms of family, I mean, at that point, you know, I was like 30 something. Um, they didn't have that much of a say. They were obviously a little bit concerned, but they trusted me to make the right decision.
That makes sense. At that point, eventually you want their support, but you have to make your own realization that this is the pathway for you. In that process, you jumped into a small company. There's so many exciting things and so many daunting things that happen through that process. What was your biggest takeaway through that whole experience at that startup?
Yeah, I've actually done that a similar jump earlier in my career. So moving from the travel agency, we were 400 people, a global company, and I moved into a 5 people agency, no offices. We were working from the founder's home. So I actually did it twice. Um, I guess there's a lot of excitement because you really get to build something. You can really put the infrastructure in place and have a meaningful impact on how the company actually grows, which is what attracted me. But there's also a lot of chaos because you don't actually know what you're doing. You're not sure. You're guessing, you have ideas, but you need to validate them and you need to get a response from the market. You need to see what's working, what's not. And it can be very frustrating, especially if you're the kind of person who really needs structure and stability. Because when you work for a startup that early, probably every other week, strategy changes, or the market changes, or something changes. And you really have to learn how to deal with that. I wasn't great at the beginning. I got really frustrated every time that something changed, but I just realized I'll never make it through if this is how I feel every time. So I just really learned how to be more flexible. I stopped planning for a year. All of my plans were for a quarter, maybe like 6 months. And I was always ready to make changes if necessary.
Were you able to do that through self-realization, through any work that you did, books you read, mentors you spoke with? Like, who helped you on that journey?
Well, I would say I was so frustrated that there was no other way. And the person who made me realize it is probably my husband, who got to hear all of my complaints and at some point told me, babe, if you're not happy, you're going to have to go and do something else. You complained when you worked for a corporate that it was too slow, that things, took too long and you needed too many approvals. you have the freedom now, so you're going to have to make the most of it. So you have to figure out, are you in or out? And I just decided I'm going to be in, and I don't know, still got frustrated, but learned how to deal with it in a more productive way.
I think I would definitely like your husband because ultimately I share a similar sentiment where I often tell my clients where the problem isn't the problem is the meaning you're giving the problem. And so often than not, we always want what we can't have, or we don't appreciate what we have in the moment. And you had stability at one point, then you had the autonomy to go and do whatever you want, implement any strategy. And again, so I think the realization really is that you reframe what's happening in front of you and you're able to actually go and do whatever it is you want to do, but you do it with purpose and you do it with clarity. And that's what's afforded you an opportunity now to do these incredible things. You've obviously built out a LinkedIn presence. You are continuously growing your personal brand as well as helping other companies do that. What was the realization for you that I have an opportunity to help people online? I have the opportunity to eventually start my own consulting practice. How did you go from making that leap of working from a small company to going out and becoming your own consulting agency?
Yeah, that's actually two separate stories. So in terms of consulting, my husband and I moved to California 2 years ago, and when we got here, we actually didn't really have anything planned. So we just trusted ourselves to figure it out. And initially, I started networking, reaching out to all the people I knew, and some of them asked if I would be interested in doing consulting. And I said yes. And initially, I did it for free. I didn't even think that would be my business. I just thought, I don't want to be spending my entire day looking for a job. Maybe I'll do something fun, on the side. And it went really well and I got referrals. And then I decided, okay, maybe it's time to actually start charging for my services. And this is kind of how I ended up doing consulting. And it was perfect timing. I just moved into a new country and I really wanted to have enough time to settle in, to find a nice place to live, to furnish it, to feel at home. I didn't want to rush into anything. So the ability to own my own schedule was, it was just the perfect timing for me. And as I was doing that work, I felt something was missing in a way. And I think it's because I spent almost a decade as a leader and I always had a team and I had people around me. And I kind of missed that. And in some of my projects, I interacted with team members and they all relied on me for advice. And at some point, I thought maybe I should just write this down and share it with more people. And this is kind of how the idea for the book started. And that led me to think if I want people to read this book, they first need to know who I am and trust me. And the best way I know to do that is to build a community. So I just started posting on LinkedIn and somehow got here.
Powerful. And that's how you and I connected, for the record, for everyone, is through LinkedIn. And again, it just highlights the power of networking, but also the power of building a personal brand on a professional social networking site like LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if you can. There's two things I want to do. One, I want to make sure that we can help people develop their own personal brand. But two, there's so much power in the story of moving from Israel to the US. So I'm going to give you the option of which road do you want to go down right now?
Yeah, I'd love to help in any way I can. So happy to share either one.
So let's do both because I know that the power of the story in transition from any country to another country is so valuable. And I know it
Yeah.
wasn't easy for you, so let's expand on that. Let's talk about what
Yeah, of
that
course.
process was like for you.
So I guess in a way, I was a little bit fortunate that I spent most of my career working for international companies. So I spent most of my days interacting with an American audience, sometimes doing marketing for, within the U.S. So it wasn't completely foreign to me. And I also spent a lot of time here, especially when I worked for Microsoft. So it wasn't that big of a leap, but it's still different. People um, look at you a little bit differently. And I think just, I guess for me, the job searching process was probably the biggest challenge. Um, just because, some of the terminology, some of the qualities that people were looking for were a little bit different than what I was used to. So it definitely took some research, obviously making a ton of mistakes. So saying everything possibly wrong within every interview the first couple of weeks. But then also realizing that, maybe I have a different way of doing things, and maybe I can build my brand through that consulting work and only then take the next step. And it was just what's right for me.
You're so right that most people, especially when they immigrate here or move here to the States, that is, they want to get a job. I think you were fortunate that you had the language. When I look at somebody like my parents or other friends as parents, they might not necessarily even have the language. So there's different launch pads for different people, but it highlights your experience where you might know the language, but you still don't know what the common language in business is here or what the expectation is in interviewing. And it's such an important distinction as we think about how do we become better leaders? How do we become better employees? How do we grow in our career? These are things that we can be mindful of. So I think it's really important that we highlight that. The other piece of your story that I love is that it wasn't easy to even come here, right?
Oh
It's
no, it wasn't.
it took you how many years? 7 years to get here?
Almost. So, my husband and I, we do this thing where we each plan our own yearly goals, but then we come together and think about our kind of overall goals together, what we want to achieve. And one of the things we aligned on very early in our relationship is that we would both love to live in the US. We would both want to try and build a career here. And we thought about different ways to get here. And for a really long time, we just couldn't find a solution. Every time we thought we figured it out, like, hey, I'm working for Microsoft, maybe they'll relocate me, but it just didn't work. But we didn't give up because at the beginning of our relationship, we traveled to the US together. We were in New York, Las Vegas, San Francisco, and we fell in love. And we knew one day we have to live here, so we just kept on going. And I don't even remember what triggered it, but my husband saw an opportunity. It was one of these things that are like one in a million, but it worked. So after almost 7 years, we actually got our green cards and were able to move here.
Well, congratulations. And I'm glad you persevered through that because many people would give up, right? It's not easy. And I'm glad you and your husband are aligned. And I think that in itself is a powerful way to go about any mutual relationship with a partner. But what's beautiful about that is you didn't give up on that dream, right? Microsoft
Yeah.
didn't work out. You tried a different thing. Your husband suggested something, you tried that. And there's so much power in persistence and perseverance. So I commend you for that. And if we're going to do something really special, is combine the idea of perseverance with what you're really good at, which is building a personal brand. And I know that there's a lot of people right now who are trying to do that through different mediums, right? LinkedIn, TikToks, Instagram, Twitter, whatever it might be for them. But what really worked for you, right? You've built up a beautiful presence on LinkedIn. If you're not following Maya, I highly, highly recommend it. Go do it right now. Add her. She's a great personality in terms of just learning and being able to digest information. But what is that process? What are some of the tips that you'd recommend for people?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, thank you. It's kind of a funny story, right? So when I started writing the book, I thought to myself, you know, how am I going to build a community? How am I going to get people to know that I even exist, right? Because if you're not a famous author, you can write a book and no one will ever know it exists. And I thought, hey, I'm going to go to LinkedIn, right? I mean, I'm targeting young professionals. LinkedIn has a ton of young professionals. It's going to be perfect. And I started posting, and I probably posted for, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks every single day. and nothing happened. Like literally nothing. Crickets. And it made me think, okay, I'm probably doing something wrong because I can see other people successful on this platform. So I started by just following other people within my domain of expertise to see what they were doing differently. But I also reached out to my target audience. I literally reached out to young professionals I don't know on LinkedIn and asked them. I disguised it as a career coaching call. I was like, hey, I will give you 30 minutes of free career coaching. I just wanted to talk to them. I wanted to know what young professionals care about. What are their biggest challenges? What keeps them up at night when it comes to their job? And through those conversations, I learned what really matters. And that's where I focused my content. And it wasn't overnight, it still took like 4 months to actually start seeing traction. But that understanding of who my audience is, what they need, and creating content that is what they want and not what I want to say, I think that was the big inflection point.
It's such a powerful thing to say because what I'll remind people and emphasize with what you just said is the importance of market research, right?
Yep.
You had mentioned there's a couple weeks of crickets. Again, it's really easy to stop yourself in your tracks and say, I'm done. But you took the time to kind of shift and ask yourself, like, how am I going to get more information about what my audience actually wants? And you took the next steps in that process. How long have you been on this journey in terms of posting? How do you actually keep up that momentum as well?
Yeah, it's been about a year of posting 5 days a week, every single week. So yeah, persistence, as you mentioned before, plays a big role in probably everything that I do. Early on, it was a lot easier because I had so much to say. So it was much easier to come up with ideas. I was also writing the book at the same time. So I had a ton of content. Today, it's a little bit different, but I still create my content in advance. So I would just throughout the week, every time I think about something, every time I speak to someone, maybe someone asks me a question on LinkedIn, I will just kind of copy and paste it into this document where I save all of my ideas. And during the weekend, I'll try and come up with content. That's basically the process. And it's getting to be more challenging because I don't want to repeat the same information. I want to make sure that I keep it fresh, and sometimes it seems like I already talked about everything, even though it's not possible. And I think, again, this is where that mindset comes in with that persistence that, I can't give up. I keep telling myself there are so many people, I don't want to call it rely on me, but, they have become accustomed to my content and it's helping them. So I can't let them down. I have to continue, creating for them, not for me.
Well, to that point, I'm sure you know that the next step is pretty much the same step that you had before. Ask them more of what they want.
Yeah, exactly.
So, can we talk about your book for a second? For those people listening who might not even know the title, remind me, is it Invaluable? Is that
Yeah.
right? So, tell us what is invaluable. If somebody were to grab it right now, what are they going to learn?
Yeah. So invaluable is, I would say, a guide for anyone who wants to become a kick-ass employee. It's basically what to do from the minute you get a job to become a high performer. And it's based on my experience, my 15 years of experience, where I moved from being an individual contributor to a VP level executive, got promoted 10 times in those 15 years, and got a bunch of raises and bonuses without ever asking for them. And I think a lot of the time in our culture, when you talk about high performers, you think about people who are very loud, obnoxious, step on other people just to get to what they want. And I was able to do that without any of that. And it's mostly based on acquiring the right soft skills. There are actually 10 of them in the book. And I walk you through each and every one of those skills, what they are, but also how to actually implement them. So it's very tactical, not just inspirational.
I love that. I can only imagine that there's a great deal of empathy and compassion and EQ that comes in.
Yep.
So if you're listening, you're going through some sort of struggle, transition, pivot, check out Maya, grab her book. It's powerful in what you teach. I know it's super valuable. I'm curious though, because a lot of your experience has been in Israel, and naturally, we're all human beings, but there's a cultural element that plays into it. Do you think or foresee any sort of differentiation in that cultural part from your own experience, though, who you're teaching today? Or do you think it's applicable to everyone?
I definitely think it's applicable almost across the board. Obviously, you do need to make some tweaks when you work in a different environment. But because I spent the majority of my career working for international companies, I actually got to work with people from all over the world. And I also managed people in different countries and different cultures. So I really learned how to approach them and how to make sure that the messaging would land well with different cultures, and hopefully I was able to do that with a book as well.
Awesome. Cool. So, Maya, look, before we let all of our guests off the hook, we always make sure to have some fun with them and put them on the hot seat. So, we're going to ask you some fun questions that are somewhat challenging. So, I want to make sure that you're ready. So, are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's go.
Let's do this. All right, Maya, you have a plethora of knowledge, and I know that there's more for you to share and do in this world. So, if you had an opportunity to teach any class to a million students right now, what would be the topic of that class?
That's an easy one. I would teach people how to build the career of their dreams, how to actually put together a plan so they can achieve whatever they define as success.
Awesome. Question number two is, if you had to read one book for the rest of time, what would be that book?
Mindset, Carol Dweck.
Love that book. Powerful.
Yep.
Last question for you. Your final dinner, where would it be? And name three people that you would invite to that dinner. They could be alive, they could be dead, doesn't matter. Who would you bring and where would it be?
That's a tough one.
I knew I had to stump you somehow.
I know. Well, I'm a little bit in love with New York, so it might be somewhere in New York. And my husband will have to be there because he's my best friend and my everything. And I'd love to have my mom there. She passed away about a decade ago. Um, and just my family, anyone from my family that I can bring in. I'm missing them because I haven't seen them for a year and a half now. So yeah,
Awesome. I love the authenticity and wanting a family dinner that's peaceful, nice, in one of the most beautiful cities in the world.
yeah.
Maya, thank you for joining us. I do want to make sure that people are able to connect with you because, again, you have so much wisdom and knowledge and generosity to share with people. What's the best way to connect? Is it LinkedIn? Are there other ways to connect with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is great, Maya Grossman, or you can go to my website, mayagrossman.com, and find everything you need there.
Perfect. Make sure to add Maya on LinkedIn, follow her, check out her book, Invaluable. There's so much wisdom and knowledge in it, as you just heard. Maya, I generally appreciate everything that you just said. Thank you so much for joining us on the Career Meets World podcast. And as we always say, go unleash your wildest potential.
Thanks for having me.